Alright, hell yeah. So in this video, we're going to be talking about finishing your strokes. And this is something that I get complacent about when you're like, why am I just spinning in a circle? And because I'm not focused on that correction. You know what I mean? R1 is for sure a paddle, some sort of pry. This really locks it in. And that can be very challenging, as a beginner to even get a pry. But there's ways to, you know, just kind of do a like either fanning strokes, like you could paddle this way and correct. You might be just doing this, but at least I'm focusing on finishing the stroke, and so that's what we're gonna paddle around. And what you're gonna notice is that anytime I take a paddle stroke, I'm gonna get aggressive, and I'm gonna focus on locking that in. And so whatever stroke that you're gonna take, make sure that you have something that locks in the direction you're going, and usually the correction is past the direction you're going. So if I want to go that way, and this is kind of where people start, is this back and forth. And even in paddle guiding, that's kind of how you start. You want the bow of your boat to go one way and then the correction to go the other. But again, I'm going to be doing my offside, working on that. And for the start of this video, is going to be very aggressive. Even going backwards is actually easier in this boat because it's weighted. But if I take a paddle stroke, you know what I mean? Really get aggressive. And with this technique, you can kind of mess up, over rotate, but then get that around, or just focus on that aggression just a lot faster. Take your stroke, really be focused on finishing your stroke. Hell yeah. All right, so we're at a stop. Doesn't mean I can't go in the direction that I want to go. Hell yeah. So even like right here, coming towards you, you gotta push off a bit. And that direction is the harder direction to go, but I can always bring it around. Hell yeah. That's the easier direction. Yeah. And backwards is a lot easier. Hell yeah. All right, so with this technique of finishing your stroke, we're gonna do two exercises. I'm gonna switch to my onside. Well, no, let's stick to the offside. Well, maybe go to the onside. So what we're gonna do is, one is do a paddle stroke and just focus on like right here. So when I paddle, I'm prying. I'm for sure making sure to finish that stroke. You know what I mean? Make sure that's solid. Make sure the correction is there. Give a second push on the correction. Sometimes pry first, paddle. But my focus is going to be right here. And so, especially doing like the two turning strokes, it's hard to get a perception of where the boat goes, like what the boat naturally wants to do. So that's exercise one, just focus right here. Exercise two is then, you know, finish your stroke, but then you choose where you want to go. Because this really hones in, you know, more creativity. What I find is that I'm kind of doing the same stroke where it's just like, no, how do I get like right there? And so that way, if I want to get over to that rock, paddle to the rock. Hell yeah. And this technique doesn't need to be aggressive. You know, this is kind of where I get into the Jedi of paddling on this side. It's so strong that, you know, if I actually do want to pick a point, I want to go that direction. And I should be able to get any portion of my boat that direction. R1 is potentially about prying your boat in the direction you want to go. And so having that awareness, I'm going to come right to the camera. And then so this exercise is do the things that are actually getting the boat to go your direction. So that's kind of that exercise too. If you're not able to do that, kind of exercise one is just like, well, like going sideways should make sense that I'm prying here. I'm taking very short strokes and prying. So that's something that you could just do. I could just focus right here, and I'm not worried about the direction that my boat is going. And then like after exercise one, then you can kind of pay more attention to be like, okay, that's what I did. That was the easiest way to paddle and pry. And now I'm going to actually focus on what direction that was going. All right, hell yeah. So let's kind of practice that on the offside. In general, I want to do turns this way. That's the harder, but I'm just going to focus right here. I'm going to do some sort of combination of like paddle, pry. All right, hell yeah. See, that felt way better than just trying to do that circle. And on that one, we did a combination stroke. We did a traditional paddle pry, and then we did a shorter paddle pry right there. Oh yeah. Now let's do that exercise 2. Let's see if I could follow that same path. Now I'm looking at my path. All right, hell yeah. And just right off the bat with this boat, you know, it's an amazing boat because it rolls so small. You take it anywhere. But more my style is trying to get better dynamics to R1. And so just looking at the surfers using foam surfboards, that kind of foam construction with some sort of laminate, seems like a really good, cheap construction. So you can have that as your footprint, have it really smooth. You can have whatever chimes you want made out of foam, just kind of as your base. You could have the whole thing just out of that foam. I don't think the price would get too extreme. But definitely this boat, you could have a harder surface. And I think that would be actually way better. This thing does kind of surf. I've seen people kind of surf it, and it's just a little bit saggy. All right, hell yeah. I'm going to do that same on my strong side, both methods. right, hell yeah. And even right there, I was using a combination. Focused right here, with a little bit of focus, I was kind of observing what kind of circle I was going in. Hell yeah. All right, hell yeah. And I think one of the big focuses will be to potentially do the same thing in some of the, I got like $50 kind of longer kayaks, and you know, I'm sure they track straight. You know, this thing is real short, but even experimenting in the same lowered position in some of the hard shell kayaks, just to see what the dynamics are. One thing that you really can't get in a width this is the prying strokes. I think it actually is hard to pry the boat, but it's a good skill in this small one, this small R1. You just kind of lose this glide, which I think in a true R1, even if it was hard shell, you want that sideways. Those lateral moves are pretty cool because you need the width anyway for stability jumping around. And so definitely when you're moving this direction, it is kind of cool to actually get your boat sliding. It doesn't take much. All it takes is like making a planing angle. So even this feels real good. And that's where this boat, I can really learn from the dynamics, because like even backwards, we have so much weight in the back that it just really drives that weight. And then it acts like kind of a true displacing kayak, where you're just kind of displacing and slicing. All right, hell yeah. And backwards paddling is going to be really good for learning surf, because surf, you might have to get the boat to do something when you're in this reverse position. Maybe drive it back into the trough and then prying the bow. Once I've started, and let's talk about this stroke. So, like paddling switch in an R1, you're just going to be prying off the bow. And one of the fundamentals of getting an R1 boat going is to start with your pry first. It's the same aspect as just paddling and finishing your stroke that we're talking about today. Taking a paddle stroke and locking it in, whether it's a strong sweep like that or a more locked in pry. And so if you are finding yourself sweeping the boat to get it back, I would suggest shortening your paddle stroke, turning your paddle like a valve, and then having it deep into the side of your boat. It locks your boat into a rudder, basically giving your boat a huge rudder. But hell yeah, that's the first thing that I noticed with this is it's so undeniably fast in its switch position that I think that will just be the case with an R1 boat that's really streamlined. I'm sure doing switch moves. I'm already grabbing eddies like this, and this is the same thing as sitting back here is what's giving that driving momentum. Hell yeah. All right, hell yeah. So right there, I was working on that second step is to, I don't have to look at my paddle and pry, but now I'm going to look at the direction I'm going. So let's do these reverse strokes and circles, and we'll start with step 1 first. So that's just looking like right here. All right, hell yeah. And the other thing I'm really interested in R1 dynamics is getting glide off the stroke, because what we're able to do so far in a wide boat is to pry it in the direction we want to go. So sometimes you want to start your momentum this way, prying the boat, hitting that inertia. Any sort of inertia is huge, and then turning and paddling. I noticed two elements that are totally counterintuitive that happen in kayaking. I don't know if a lot of people talk about these, just because they're kind of rudimentary and maybe a little bit interesting. So you have displacement holes. That would be if this thing is so thin and sits in the water and can only go in a straight line, it's just parting the water. And then you have planing holes. Any sort of rockered feature of a boat adds this plane. So even me just kind of leaning on this quadrant, that is planing up over. That is a planing surface, even at such low velocity. And then in this reverse position, this is for sure displacement. So that's displacement with uninterrupted glide. And I think like the half slices of the world and slalom kayaks are kind of that combination between displacing boats and planing boats. Any kayak in general is a combination between displacing and planing, because our weight is so large to the surface area. We do draft in the water, and you know what I mean, for all intents and purposes we are pushing water. We're sitting low and we're pushing water out of the way, but you still can use this rocker nature to get dynamic even at low speeds and kind of get those planing surfaces to plane without having like a fast wave. Anytime you're surfing on a wave though, yeah, that water is planing underneath the boat. What what happens in R1 is we have such large surface area, we don't have the ability to drop in. So even in my raft, I'm looking to get a less volume, lower volume in the stern. And so when you are surfing, you are able to get the stern to cut through the wave back and forth, just kind of slice. But all inflatables, even this is not a half slice. You know, this is a lower volume stern than an R1, but by no means can you actually take this, weight it, and slice it through. And that's where in R1 on the surf waves, that would allow the R1 boat to cut through and actually balance and actually surf more flat. Currently, we're just either stuck in the lower part of the trough or headed down the trough like this. And so it makes it almost impossible to kind of balance out in the trough. But still, once you got that forward momentum, it doesn't matter. Like just anything that you see that's not touching the water, that's where the water line can end in the stern. And you'll just have low volume when you actually do go lay out. And the one thing I want to improve is the dynamics of this outside turn. So I'll do it on my strong side and offside, but turning in this direction is extremely hard. It's hard to get and maintain glide. Alright, hell yeah. That was a big improvement, just leaning. And we mentioned that idea of planing the surface. Like even at lower speeds, we can plane the surface. Right, hell yeah. And so that turn right there, that was my offside. And I think we worked on definitely, I was going to say 3 fundamentals. Definitely the 2 that we were talking about. Like, I was paying attention to where my stroke was. I was finishing the stroke, and then at the same time, looking at the direction I was going. And so, I guess finishing the stroke and looking at the stroke, that's kind of the same thing. If you can't finish the stroke, definitely look at where you're prying. And I definitely have found that turning your shoulders to the direction of pry is way easier. You can actually tell where you're going, and you can lock that pry in a lot more. That's why this offside, because even in my R1, I'm actually turning out this way to actually get a heavier lean. And here I can't see the pry, so I'm just focused mentally on finishing the stroke. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Now it's kind of bringing it all together. Set up a paddle combination that feels solid. Look to see where it goes. Finish the stroke. And then once I know where that paddle combo goes, see if I can use it to get somewhere. Hell yeah. Alright, so this is again offside. And let's try to get more momentum. What we were doing is we're taking a stroke forward and then doing that big pry like that. So we'll maybe increase this a couple times. Hell yeah. Oh yeah. But I find it very fascinating paddling this thing that is still extremely difficult, whether it's the weighted position back here to actually do the traditional R1 stroke and just gain forward momentum. So I'm going to work on that, work on leaning, seeing kind of what combination is the secret sauce for paddling, because this, a boat like this can be a test. It's like kind of a test piece. If this portion of the boat in R1 is out of the water due to high rocker, then this is the dynamic surface. And so it should be able to test the whole speed from this. This is just a wildly short boat. It's underinflated. Where I'm sitting pushes down on the floor. And that's just a combination for paddling. Your displacing surface is just right underneath you. And so unless you can plane it up and over, you can't get this thing to sit on plane. Where a hard shell kayak, just in general is both always on plane and then also equally displacing. This is just displacing all my weight right under here, so hell yeah. All right, so we're gonna work on speed. Hell yeah. All right, so that was strong side. This is offside. Yeah. All right, hell yeah. I think that's what I wanted to come to do tonight. I think we did it. Thanks for joining me. Booyah. All right, hell yeah. So this is so obvious of just sitting more forward. Now that I'm more forward, the paddle strokes will displace the boat forward, and now I can maintain that glide. Hell yeah.
Hello.
Hey, what up?
No, Joe.
Yeah. I almost just roasted my camera. That's all right though.
I blame him.
I kind of wondered if we knew where we were going.
It's his idea.
Oh, heck yeah.
I blame him.
Oh, yeah, how to get out. Alrighty. Alright, so I'm going to paddle back and forth, and we're going to see how fast this is. Hell yeah. And what I noticed right away is you get to carve the bow. You know what I mean? You can actually lay that bow forward. And that's what a typical kayak, you're able to weight and lower that bow or lean back. You're just kind of right on that pivot point. So that's huge. And I think, so let's, on the strong side, let's try to turn in that harder direction. All right, hell yeah. And I think I kind of now understand the dynamics. In a slalom boat, you're fixed in a neutral position. With a sliceier tail, you're still able to lay that in. And so that would be the same thing as effectively just getting back here and doing this. And so in an R1, since you have the ability to shift your location, you know, hopefully easy, you can get all that dynamic from a sliceier stern, as well as shift forward and lay that speed on the bow. All right, switch. Hell yeah. And so even though an R1 boat would be extra wide, still you can get those dynamics. The boat's going to be, you know, the materials to make a full-size R1 boat can get down to 55 pounds anyway. So it's more of just the rocker, the dynamics. And once you do this to a boat, your effective water line gets reduced, and then whatever you have the shape down here. And so that's kind of the next design, is turn the back into a half slice and then do some sort of like alligator's mouth design where the running surface, that footprint, is kind of surfboard-like up to a traditional kayak, same hard chines, but then a gap between your deck. And so that kind of gives a vacancy down there. So then if you did these slicing strokes, that's not going to get in the way, so hell yeah. Right. Hard side this direction, and then I might call it a night for myself. Hell yeah. So this video is for Matthew Brook Kayaking. My question, or if you could make a video paddling on one side, this would really help R1 dynamics. So I'm going to paddle this from a centered position, and I'm going to do the harder turn. The harder turn is always this outside turn. I'm going to do a full circle, and then we're going to go back into this position and kind of do that slice of turn. Hell yeah, here we go. All right, hell yeah. So now my question is an R1, is that as good as it gets? Or would you be able to show really smooth and fast outside turns just paddling on one side? What I'm interested in is increasing the glide in any way possible. The methods I have been using is a lean and getting boats to kind of plane over in that direction, but it's very difficult to continue any glide. But just in a slalom kayak, I just wanted to know if that actually glides real smooth, or if that's still paddling on one side only is still, that's a difficult thing to maintain a fast glide going around that circle. Hell yeah.